Okay, this qualifies as an emergency podcast.
Yeah, I think it was about 30 seconds after they agreed to the deal where people on Twitter was like, where's the podcast? So here it is. We're not going to let you down.
Yeah, we wouldn't do that. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. An emergency Eagle Eye Podcast. The big news on Monday morning, Jalen Hurts gets a mega extension, 5-year extension, lasts through the 2028 season, $255 million altogether. The guaranteed money, $179.3 million. So he's right now the highest paid player in NFL history, and that's the second most guaranteed money in any NFL contract ever. He got that bag, Rube.
He got the bag, and I was reminded of I'm going to do one of those one-eye stories. So it's training camp of '88, and we're at Westchester, and we knew they were trying to sign Randall to an extension. Gosh, it might have been not '89. I know it was '88 because Mike Quick was there. He's involved in the story. So they're at practice on a backfield behind the basketball gym. Down on that lower campus where they practiced. And this, by the way, is Westtown Township. It's not Westchester. And I studied my Chester County Atlas yesterday. And Randall signed a deal like just before practice. We heard that they had agreed. This is before the internet, before cell phones. So we're at practice and Randall's there and Mike Quick comes over and he's like, Randall got paid. And like everyone was marveling about how much money he got. So we asked Quick. There were no like Schefters and Rappaports back then. So you would ask the players how much the contracts were worth. And Quick's on the practice field, and he goes 3 years, 4.1. And that's how we found out Randall's huge contract extension was 3 years, $4.1 million. And that's like a week's interest on this contract. It just goes to show you how these. That was quite a while ago, but that was a big contract back then. And, now we're talking about numbers in the $250 million range. It's pretty astonishing how big a business this is, how big these contracts are. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't trust my $250 million with anybody more than Jalen Hurts. It's not going to change how he prepares, how he plays, who he is. Sometimes you never know with guys when they get this kind of money. With Jalen, I don't think anybody's going to have any concerns about how it will affect them.
Yeah, and I think it was only 35 years ago, Rube. So
I know.
I think the thing with Jalen Hurts, though, is like it might – the only way it would change his preparation is if he like works harder now because he feels even more indebted to the organization. Like that's the only possible outcome is that he takes this as a chance to work harder, which I don't even know is possible given what we've heard about him. But it's also an incredible story of, guys can get better. Like guys can improve because there was no way in the world I would believe that Jalen Hurts would sign a $255 million contract a couple years ago. He wasn't that player.
Or a year ago.
Yeah. Like the beginning of the 2023 or 2022 season, we were like, man, is he going to prove that he's the franchise quarterback? I mean, yeah, he proved he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And now he gets paid like it. It's an astounding number. You're right. But the 5-year part of it is intriguing. So a few weeks ago, John Clark had Joe Banner on the Takeoff with John Clark podcast, and it's still worth listening to now, given that we know the details of the contract. And he actually highlighted the years of the deal could be the one sticking point. Like we all knew the money was going to be a lot. It was going to be around $50 million per year. It ends up being 51. But Banner's point was that the player should want a shorter deal. The Eagles should want a longer deal. 5-year extension is a big win for the franchise.
Yeah, and Joe's thinking was correct that the way quarterback contracts are going to increase, maybe in the next week or two, and certainly over the life of this contract, by the time this contract is in year 3, year 4, that's not going to be – I guess it'll be a big number still, but it's not going to be the number. And there's going to be guys who pass it. There's going to be guys who leave it in the rearview mirror. I mean, who knows what some of the quarterback contracts, and it could be guys that we haven't even thought about yet, who are make the same kind of progress. But in 4 years, I mean, he could be the 15th highest paid quarterback. Who knows? He could be below the average starter salary among quarterbacks in the NFL. You don't know. Probably not. But quarterback contract. I mean, that's why it's like buying a house. You get locked into that rate, and no matter what happens outside it, you're still paying that amount every month, and that never goes up, and your house's value does go up. It's the same dynamic. And the Eagles are, I mean, it's an incredible investment. It's a lot of money, but I think it's a really fair contract for them. I think it's a fair contract for both sides. I mean, gosh, he gets almost $200 million guaranteed. It's hard to complain, but for the Eagles, they don't have to worry about this for quite a while. And, when I listened to that Banner interview, yeah, it was a little ominous. You start thinking, well, Jalen's going, and then, the last thing you want is a deal where the quarterback's not happy in 2 or 3 years, and he wants a new deal. But I mean, to have his rights through 2028, when he'll be 30. He'll be 30. I mean, this contract covers his prime of his life, prime of his career. And it's just exciting to see what he's going to do in that period. And who knows what comes after that. It's a little early to think about that, but I mean, it was certainly an unconventional way to find a franchise quarterback, to draft a kid in the second round when you have a Pro Bowler who helped you get to the Super Bowl and you just paid not that long before, but it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, I think there were probably some concessions on either side when this deal came together. I mean, the Eagles gave out a no trade clause, which is the first time they've ever done that.
Right.
And so that kind of gives Hurts some power that we haven't seen a player with this organization ever really have. Now, doesn't mean that theoretically in 4 years they couldn't trade him, but he has the veto power there, and that's a big deal. It's the kind of power that you'd understand why Jalen Hurts would want that, given his history. We all know his story, so I think that makes a lot of sense. But then he accepts a really long-term deal, because if you're him, you would think, man, if you can get a 3-year extension and you can hit the market at 28, you might still be in your prime, and that's a big opportunity. So the fact that it's 5 years, this is a theory, but I don't know if this is true, that could possibly be a concession on the Hurts side of it, because you would think the Eagles would want the longer term deal.
Yeah, and it also just shows you, I mean, when you think about how powerful he is in the organization now, I mean, it's like Lurie, Roseman, Sirianni, and Jalen. I mean, I guess Lurie's at the top ultimately, but I mean, Jalen is his role now. I mean, this kind of gives him, the authority, I guess, the voice in the organization, beyond what most quarterbacks have, I think. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, because he's certainly got the team first in his mind and team goals first. And he's not someone who's going to, recommend things or come out in favor of things that don't make sense. But I mean, that's a lot of power for a player. And we've seen guys who've had that. I mean, Malcolm kind of did, but not like this. I mean, he becomes one of the most important people in the Eagles history with this deal.
Yeah, it is fun when you look at it from that aspect. It's like, yeah, he has a chance to go down as an all-time great Eagle now, because he's locked in for these years. Now, look, you never know what's going to happen. We had an emergency podcast a few years ago when Carson signed that deal, but this feels different. And look, ultimately, we don't know. We all assume that Jalen's going to continue to get better. Hard to be much better than he was last year, So is there a chance that he regresses? Like, I don't see that as a chance. I think that, the work ethic prevents that from happening. Now, could there be a down year here and there? Like, yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of really great players go through that, but you feel pretty good about, if you're giving this type of contract to someone, you feel pretty good about it being him. And that's not just the football player. That's the guy.
Yeah. And yeah, things happen. Like there could be an injury, either him or one of the receivers, and all of a sudden, I mean, things change. You never know what's going to happen, but you feel pretty good. And somebody tweeted to me and asked, "What's the difference? Why does it feel different than Carson?" And I tried to think back to when they signed Carson, and at that point he had played 12 career postseason snaps. I mean, there were questions about him, and he was obviously really talented. But I mean, what Jalen has done goes so far, and who he is. And I don't want to knock Carson. I don't want to pile on Carson because I don't think he was a bad guy. But there's such a natural, leadership quality that Jalen has, and I hate that word leadership. But there's so much more depth to him as a person in that locker room than Carson ever had, and certainly talent wise. I mean, Carson might have a bigger arm, but what Jalen did last year, I mean, Carson was really good for about 10 games in 17, but for Jalen to do what he did in the postseason, Super Bowl, I don't know. I don't think there's any comparison going into these two contracts, who you feel better about. Because of who Jalen is, who he's proven to be, his work ethic, and just his ability to come up big in big situations. Again, I'm not knocking Carson. He had some really, really good years here, one great year and some incredible games, but you never felt as sure about him as you do about Jalen.
Yeah, at least not when they signed him. I mean, remember when they signed him, it was actually before the 2019 season.
Right.
So he hadn't been in the playoffs at all. It was all nicked the previous 2 years, and that's when they signed him. So I think that's fair. I mean, he was coming off another year finishing on the injured list, while Jalen is coming off one of the greatest performances in Super Bowl history. Unfortunately, they lost that game, but I won because of him, and you just feel really good about that going forward. You feel good about the team going forward. Like, things are going to have to change structurally when your quarterback is making all this money, but the Eagles knew this was coming. Even this offseason, they knew it was coming. They planned this whole offseason with the understanding that at a certain point they were going to sign this contract and it was going to take effect. And we don't have the exact structure of it yet, but I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that it's maybe not as much as Jalen has, but a lot of money that it's going to be backloaded. A lot of the money is being paid out in bonuses, so it prorates over the length of the contract. Eventually, it's going to be a massive cap number. The first couple of years, it's not going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's the same pattern as the other deals they've done, the base salary will stay the same this year, and the cap hit this year will be the chunk of the bonus that prorates. But when it gets to the big numbers, as far as cap figures, I mean, the cap's going to be over $300 million by then. So as his cap numbers go up, I mean, the cap in the next few years is going to, I mean, I've read projections. I mean, it's going to be a huge, huge number. And Howie's going to have to do some things differently, but I don't think this is going to handicap him to the point where he can't add players when he needs to. It won't be wholesale free agents all over the place, but they never really did that anyway. There might be one per year they can't sign, but I really think he'll be able to function. And I think getting this done and knowing the structure and knowing what all the years are like, he can start to plan, like when do we want to do Devontae? When do we want to, whoever it is, start thinking about future contracts, because now he knows what the Jalen contract exactly looks like. They're going to have a chance to remain competitive, even with this deal. Obviously, you have to keep drafting well, and they've done better the last couple of years or so. You got to keep doing that, but I mean, there's no reason to think that they're going to, turn it to, say, Seattle. Like, you look at what happened with Seattle once they signed Russell. I don't expect that to happen here.
Yeah, and it's not like they didn't have success after that contract in Seattle. It's just you have to change the way you do it. And you're right, the draft is important. We'll see how good that 2022 draft is this year. I think, because it looks like more of those guys are going to have to play. But you have 4 picks in the top 100 this year, including 2 first-rounders. You have opportunities here to continue to get better, get cheaper players who are on rookie deals, and that's the way you kind of just supplement it. And it's not rocket science to figure it out. You just have to make those picks, and you have to get the right players. If you do that, getting the quarterback is fine. It's a good problem to have, figuring out a franchise quarterback. He's the best quarterback in the NFC. I mean, we did this, a month ago, trying to figure out who's the second best quarterback in the NFC. And no matter which name you land on, it's a pretty big drop off.
I think we came up with Ian Book by the end of the pod. Yeah, you're right. And there's not a lot of quarterbacks. I think the only quarterbacks in the NFC who've taken a team to the Super Bowl are Stafford, Goff, and Jalen, right? I believe that's it. And
the Rodgers,
Yeah, assuming Rodgers isn't a Packer. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. But the landscape in the NFC, I mean, there's no reason for the Eagles not to be not just competitive over the next 5 or 6 years, but to be, I think anything less than a couple more Super Bowl appearances would be disappointing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you brought up the McNabb era. Like, once he was established as the guy, like that's still the greatest era of consistent Eagles football. Now the Super Bowl run in 2017 was great, but the goal is to have a shot at it every year. Now, it never worked out with Andy, but like, that was the model. It was just be in the mix every year, give yourself the best chance to win a Super Bowl. Ultimately, you have to do it or you'll be remembered for the failures, but you want to give yourself a shot every year. And with the current climate of the NFC, there's no reason to think they can't do that.
Yeah, and you referenced my column. I didn't. People were wondering, when did he say that? It was a column. Yeah. It wasn't on the pod, right? Yeah. But the column's up and on NBC Sports Philadelphia. But I think, and we forget how good Donovan was. I mean, gosh, they went to the playoffs 9 out of 11 years from 2000 to 2010. He wasn't here in 2010, but they were a lot of deep runs, a lot of really good teams, but never won the ultimate one. And I mean, sitting here now, I feel like they will. I feel like this team will win another Super Bowl before this contract's up, before Jalen's done. I'll even say I'll be surprised if they don't. And part of that's Jalen, part of that's the team around him, part of it's Howie. You have a coach who knows how to get to a Super Bowl. He's shown that. You have an owner who's committed to having the best possible everything year after year. And the biggest part is the quarterback. If you have that elite quarterback and you have good players around him, and you have an NFC that doesn't really have – the Niners are really good. We don't really know who their quarterback's going to be, how good Purdy is, or if Purdy will even be the starter when he's healthy. Who knows? Dallas is still really talented. Nobody's still won this division twice in a row since 2003 and 2004, which I think will be a big storyline this coming year if the Eagles could do that. But you look at the conference and it's there to be taken.
Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in a great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And the other part of this, they beat the other contracts. And I know it's something Howie Roseman said he didn't really care about. Yeah, I think they cared about it because they got this deal done in April. That's even sooner than I thought they were going to get it done. And that $51 million per year, obviously the guaranteed money matters more, but the $51 million per year, I think that probably becomes the floor for Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. And you can maybe throw Lamar in the mix because it's tough because I don't know exactly what's going on there, but those contracts aren't going to be any cheaper.
You're probably right. It could be structured a little differently, but you're probably right. And I think for that reason, it's good to get out of the way, but also just organizationally to go into OTAs and training camp. I mean, it was going to get done before training camp, but just to go into the off season and have that not be a question and a factor, and to give Jalen that that comfort level going into the offseason is huge. Just to not have it be a distraction, to not have it be hanging over everybody, to not have Howie and Jalen's agent going back and forth, and sometimes it gets ugly and somebody runs to the you hear. I mean, look, you hear this stuff all the time. This guy's not happy. He's not going to go to camp. This guy's not going to. They don't have to worry about any of that. It's done. It's over with. It's April. The draft hasn't even come up yet, and you just move forward. And I think this organization is really good with that kind of stuff, just avoiding those kind of distractions, and at least recently. And I think it's just huge to have it done early.
Yeah, it's just an even bigger vote of confidence for the player too, and just you move forward. He's the guy. There's no questions. He's the guy. I do want to ask you this, because it was a question to Nick Sirianni at the owners' meetings, and it's something that I have been thinking about. He was asked if they'll use Jalen any differently, and we talked about this right after the owners' meetings when Nick said that, because he said you basically know, like, he is who he is. That's part of what makes him so good. But now that we're going to see pen to paper on this contract and this investment, do you think that's really the case? Or are they going to have to, at times, whether it's, the way you build the team or the way you call plays, are they going to have to alter it a little bit to protect their quarterback?
I think they will. I really do. I think some of that will happen organically. I think we've seen with so many running quarterbacks, as they get older and really master the offense and grow more comfortable in the passing game, they just don't run as much. And I think that'll happen. You never know. It didn't happen with Vic. It's happened with most running quarterbacks. Lamar still runs a lot, but I do think you have to protect him a little more. I think. I mean, I thought there were games where he ran too much last year, and you break it down and you take out the kneel downs, and usually he's running out of bounds, not getting big hits. But I would, if I'm investing $250 million in somebody, I'm going to be a little more careful.
Yeah, some of it's like really.
You don't want to take away what makes him so dangerous.
Yeah, sure. I think some of it's really tricky too, because yes, he can get hurt running, but he can get hurt inside the pocket, and sometimes his running ability might eliminate some of those opportunities for him to get hurt in the pocket.
Right.
If he's kind of avoiding pressure, he's fleeing, and he's not getting. So it's tough to really come up with like, all right, these percentage of plays need to be different or this and that. But yeah, once you invest this much into one player, and I think some of it is, draft centric. Like you want to make sure your offensive line is always very good. Not that that's not already the plan. They obviously want to build through the trenches, but you've seen some quarterbacks in the league just get hit so much early in their careers. I always think, like, remember David Carr in those early Texans years, just getting his head chopped off every game. Joe Burrow to an extent before they really made some strides and fixed that offensive line.
Andrew Luck. I mean, would he have retired if they'd protected him a little better?
Probably not. Yeah. So I think that's a really big part of it. Having a run game that can thrive without him being a runner all the time is important. And so that's, that doesn't mean they're going to draft Bijan at 10, but it means, having running backs who can shoulder the load. It means having an offensive scheme that allows, like he's always going to be a part of it, I think, because you want that, like his threat on the backside matters, but you limit those hits if you can.
Yeah, there's no question. And it'll be interesting because we don't really know how Brian Johnson's going to call a game and how he'll differ from Shane Steichen and what's going to change, if anything. It's still Nick's offense, but the play calling is going to be different. Brian's a guy that's known Jalen and his family forever. Will that impact how he's used? If he, I don't know the answer to that. I think that's something we'll learn as the year goes on, but I mean, there were times last year where it was kind of ridiculous how much he was running. I felt.
Well, I mean, the game he got hurt, the Bears game man, you're like, man, he's taking a lot of shots. He's going to get hurt, and then he gets hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was cold, and as you know, your phone froze, I think. No, yours didn't. The other ones did. But
yeah, the other phone froze.
Yeah, I do think you have to be smarter at times, not just because of the contract, but just because of the player.
Yeah. That's the other part of this for him, like not getting a chance to reach the open market or the threat of reaching the open market when you're like 28 for a player that has his style. That's a big concession.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. And I mean, it's got to be such a comforting feeling for everyone in the organization, knowing that he's here and he's not going away and you're going to be good. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't hurt if you're trying to sign free agents. It's like, should I go there? Well, they have Daniel Jones or whoever. I mean, no knock on Daniel Jones, but where would you go if you were a receiver and, the Giants and Eagles are both trying to get you? I mean, there's just not a lot of, and it's not just his ability, but just his leadership, the way he draws people toward him naturally, organically. There's so much that other players around the league, I mean, they're drawn to him. You can see it on social media. You see it after games. People want to be part of this. They want to be part of what Jalen has helped build here. And there's a tremendous amount of value there. And I think that goes for defense too. I mean, he's one of those guys that, well, we've seen quarterbacks that don't even talk to the guys on the defense. And I think Jalen kind of just sees everyone as his teammate. And I think he embraces that. And so if you're a edge rusher or a linebacker and you're looking for a team like this guy, I want to be this guy's teammate. I just think there's a lot of that all over the league with him. Now, I don't know how many free agents they'll be able to sign with the contract, but I think he's really helped make this a popular destination for players.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on the whole culture aspect there, and they have bred, I think, what it has become a really positive culture in the locker room. And it's a concerted effort, but it also comes a little naturally when you have guys who have been here for a really long time. Like, we know the names, Fletcher and Kels and BG, Lane. But it's Jalen's now. And he's going to continue that. And that's the nice thing. It's a continuation of the culture that has been really important, honestly, ever since Chip left. It's been important for the players to take a sense of ownership, a sense of pride. And it was important under Doug. And then Nick comes in and the accountability rises even more. I mean, Nick is so big on accountability. And I think that really kind of falls in line with Jalen. And I always think back to like early in his career, it was always about what he could do better. Where, and I don't want to do this, but early in Carson's career, it was something that I noticed. And it wasn't a big issue early because he was really good. But there were always moments like we have to be better. There was never personal accountability. And with Jalen, that's always been there. And I think that's really important. And I think it falls in line with what Nick wants.
I remember the conversation we had. I think me, you, and ESP were walking back from a Carson presser up, we one of a million times. And one of us said, man, he just really isn't accountable, is he? It's always we. It's never me. It's always we. And you just started to notice it more and more. You never hear that from Jalen. You never hear even the most subtle, passive aggressive, I mean, a guy could drop a perfect pass in the end zone. He'll say, I have to make a better throw and mean it,
And even if it's not true, sometimes that doesn't even matter. Like you want that in the leader of the team. And he always, minutes after losing the Super Bowl, he's talking about it is how he wants to learn from it and get better. We asked him about the contract on locker cleanout day. And he's like, I want to win a championship. There'll be a day to talk about that. It's going to be really funny. We're kind of expecting next week will be the Jalen Hurts presser. him being forced to talk about himself and a giant contract is going to be a fun cat and mouse game that I'm not sure he's going to play along with.
I know. I was thinking about that. It's the last thing he's going to want to talk about. Mm-hmm. He never talks about himself. He hates it. I think it's genuine. I just don't think he's comfortable doing it. He did a little bit at the Super Bowl, a little more than he has. But to sit there and talk about a contract, I'm really curious how he's going to deflect the conversation to his teammates and his coaches. I'm sure he'll say, this isn't about me. It's about the team and my teammates. Devontae hadn't made those catches, and AJ, I wouldn't be. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of that. But it's going to be an interesting character study because it's so far out of his comfort level talking about himself, and that's going to be the topic.
I can picture him sitting up there, getting asked about it, and saying something like, it's not a finish line. It's not a finish line. Pause. It's a starting line. I can see something like that.
That's good.
It's not bad.
Yeah. He'll have, I'm sure he's already working on his aphorisms. He's got a lot of them. I think we should track his aphorisms next year.
Yeah. There was a while where I was writing them all down, and then it became a little cumbersome, honestly.
He ran out of pages.
It was a lot. That's a good idea. I also want to come up with my Nick Sirianni bingo board.
Oh, yeah.
For a press conference. So, free space could be dog mentality. Larry Karras mention gets you in there. Frank Reich mention gets you in there. Connecting and kind of mentions because play bing. I might work on that in the off season.
Yeah. Competition, basketball.
Competition, yeah.
High school. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Tells a story about his athletic career.
Right. Definitely. Larry Karras is, whoever has, that's going to be, because somebody's going to win this in like 3 press conferences because, it's interesting to me. We're off topic a little bit, but I would, what's that?
A little bit.
A lot. He's got so many. I was worried, like, if his message would still get through because he has those go-to, little things. Those go-to, what does he call them? His fun, whatever. What's the word that's up in the bubble? The 5
core values.
Core values, yeah. But he talks about the same thing so much that you just wondered if the message would stop getting through. Because you keep hearing the same thing. And he's talked about how he's got to change his stories and uses new stories. He's always looking for new videos to show, new stories. But it's the same stuff.
I pitched him a few.
Did you?
Yeah.
But
I'll share one with you.
Yeah.
Because he always wants like short memories or like not blaming other. I brought up the Steve. He's not a big baseball guy, but I brought up the Steve Bartman Cubs situation where all the focus went to Bartman instead of like just handling their jobs. And I don't know if he ever used it. I'll have to ask him. I'll have to follow up.
Yeah. But certainly last year's result tells you that his message is still getting through. You don't go 14-3 without it and get to the Super Bowl. So, And the other thing about Jalen, and just to kind of tie everything all together, like, we used to always ask Andy, like, if you guys had drafted Tim Couch or Achilles Smith instead of Donovan in 99, and there were those 5 quarterbacks who were taken in the first round, Cade McNown and Dante Culpepper were the other ones. And obviously Donovan was a lot more successful. Culpepper was pretty good. The other 3 are disasters. Like, if you had drafted Achilles and the Bengals had drafted Donovan, what would have been different? He said, well, Achilles would have been really good. Like, a lot of it is just having the right coach, being in the right situation. Andy was huge on how they didn't rush Donovan as a rookie, and the Bengals rushed Achilles Smith, and he never really recovered from it. If you don't have the right coach, all the talent in the world doesn't matter. And I think Jalen had a former NFL quarterback as a rookie. And he was pretty close to Doug. He speaks highly of Doug, and I think Doug kind of pointed him in the right direction. But then the relationship with Nick has just been so huge, and Shane. But if you don't, they have a offensive head coach who, I think really connects with Jalen. You can knock that off your bingo card. They really have a great relationship, and that's just so huge to this whole thing to make it work. Nick is big on collaborating. He listens to Jalen. If there's something Jalen doesn't want to run, he just crosses it off the game plan or off the playbook. That's such a big part of this. It's not just having talent, but being in the right situation. And so that goes back to Jeff Lurie for hiring the right coaches, which he's done almost every time. And it speaks highly of Nick and of Jalen to have that relationship that's allowed this kind of success to happen.
Yeah, and having a coach who's not like so worried about his scheme that he was willing to figure it out, like what works best for this quarterback. And so a lot of things that he didn't run. I mean, they didn't run in Indianapolis. He didn't run them in San Diego or LA. Like these are things that they've put in the playbook because it makes sense with their quarterback. And some of it's opportunity too, I think we certainly don't want to minimize the work Jalen put in because you get the feeling he'd be successful anywhere because of how hard he works, but it doesn't mean he would have had the opportunity. It just worked out that he got here at a time where the Eagles were awful and the wheels were coming off, and he got that opportunity late in the year. And then the top quarterback wanted to get traded. They trade him, and then there's opportunity, and he made the most of it. Sure. But it's not a given that if you're a second round quarterback, you're going to get that type of opportunity.
Yeah, no, there's no question. I wonder what the biggest contract a second round pick has ever gotten.
This.
No, I mean, before this, Drew Brees was a second round pick, right? Did he get?
I'd have to.
Yeah, I have to look that up. But I wonder what's going through Carson's mind today. Like, I wonder if he's genuinely happy for Jalen. He's so inscrutable. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's not what I'm thinking about today. No,
it just crossed my mind. I mean, you think about where these two guys were just a couple of years ago. It's just crazy how it's at. I think the way Jalen handled that situation in 2020 was, we never really have heard the entire story of what it was like. And, it was during COVID. Everything was shut down. There were no fans in the stands. The meetings were virtual and, masks in the building. I mean, it was just, but he must have handled it well because he won that team over that year. And we've seen the product of that the last 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, really, he's been in some weird situations, leaving Alabama, going to Oklahoma. When he won over that Oklahoma team, he was there for like 6 months. He's just, he has that about him, and he did that pretty early here. And you always just wondered if the play was going to catch up to the guy, and it did this past year. So then you end up with the best of both worlds. And it's funny.
Great Hannah Montana song, by the way. Best of both worlds. You can just listen to your Hannah Montana CD later.
Didn't expect that one. That wasn't on my bingo board.
The Reuben Hannah Montana reference.
Yeah.
Didn't you go to the show when she was in our building? Like the Wells Fargo Center?
I did not. It was a Hannah. So no, it was Miley Cyrus, but she was Hannah Montana.
That's correct. Yeah.
So she did like all the
did only Hannah Montana. Well, that's all she had back then. There were no Miley Cyrus records. She just had Hannah Montana songs. And who was in her band was Kay Hanley of Letters to Cleo.
Okay.
Great band, Letters to Cleo, who I once saw play at Delaware Valley College in Doylestown. I was the only person at the concert. I was the only person that showed up. They played a free show in the gym at Delaware Valley College. And then like a month later, they had
a person there and they still did it.
Yeah, they did the show. It was great. It was so much fun.
Maybe great for you. I don't think they were feeling that.
They were not real happy, but
they were like, dude, can you please go home?
What's that?
They didn't want to do that show, right?
Well, they were getting paid. They were getting paid a lot of money from Delaware Valley College student concert committee. There was one song they just started laughing in the middle of it because one of them thought they'd played it already. And the guitar player, John Eisenstein, who also was in Hannah Montana's band, it was actually the musical director. He said, we played it in soundcheck, but there were more people here for soundcheck. Because like all the hip, like Delaware Valley College kids, they just wanted to be at soundcheck, and then they didn't come to the show. But a month later, their song, I think it was Here and Now, was on that, what was that show, Beverly Hills 90210 or something?
Yeah, it was a pretty big show.
Yeah, they had a song on that, and they got huge, and they sold out the TLA about a month after or 2 months after they played Delaware Valley College, and no one was there. So I don't really know how we got here, but
I'm glad we did.
Yeah, it was.
I was there for the journey on that.
We're not getting this kind of content on any other Eagles pod, learning about the letters to Cleo, Hannah Montana connection here.
I like that you were all the band members from Hannah Montana band, but what was that Beverly Hills show that was?
I forgot the number because it was like 90, because like Yes had an album 90125, right? And then that's like Owner of a Lonely Heart was on that one, and then Beverly Hills 90210. Yeah. Although, who was the girl? Shannon Doherty was in that show. Was she in that show? She was married briefly to Jimmer Podrasky from the Rave Ups, who's a friend of mine.
Okay.
Great band, the Rave Ups. I'm sure you were at their show at Dobbs in 1988.
Yeah, I was the only guy there. It was weird.
It was packed when they played there. It was packed. It was a great show. Anyway, we're off the rails. Get us back on the rails, Dave. That's your job.
Yeah. I kind of let that one happen. I apologize for that. You have anything else on this Hurts deal?
No.
We should talk to Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni later this week for their pre-draft availability, but I'm guessing that's going to be a little hijacked by the Jalen Hurts news. Kind of curious what they'll say about how it came together and their plans for him in the future.
Yeah. When's that scheduled for? Thursday, we think?
Tentatively, yeah.
Yeah. Be really interesting to hear how we talk about how it all came together and, what it means for the roster moving forward.
Yeah. I never sensed much angst from Howie or the organization. They pretty much always knew this was going to get done. There was no hand-wringing. Like they knew the whole time that they were going to sign Jalen. No big deal.
I said this a couple months ago. I think both sides knew pretty early on the basic where this deal was going to end up. That it was going to be around $50 million a year, and it turned out to be slightly higher. But I think they were on the same page because, yeah, you're right. That you never got any sense from Howie that he was, that there was any question where it was going to get done or that it was going to get done promptly. I mean, I was really struck at the owners' meetings just the confidence and the almost casual way he talked about it, like, yeah, it's going to get done. So, yeah.
Man, that was really from the whole off season.
So are we done? Can I just show a photo?
Sure.
So you called me. I just left my parents' apartment in Philly, and I was in Plymouth meeting. I was about to go get some lunch when you called me and told me that the Hurts deal was done. And so I ran into a restaurant. I had lunch and I wrote my column that's now up on the site. And I come back out of there. So I'm at Plymouth Meeting Mall, and look how this guy parked. Have you ever seen anything like that? What is that?
He's got a head start to leave.
It's like 8 feet in front of the end of the spot. I've never seen anything like it. And he had New York plates, not surprisingly. I wanted to write a note and just put on his windshield, but it's like, you don't need to. Like, just when he starts walking to his car and realizes, and then I was running, maybe he didn't put maybe it's like a 5-speed and didn't put his brake on and it just rolled.
And it stopped? It wouldn't
stop.
stop.
Really has 5 speeds anymore.
Yeah.
I wish I did. I miss my manual transmission.
All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please
I love having a 5-speed.
Please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. This has been an emergency podcast. For Reuben Frank, I'm Dave Zangaro. We'll talk to you soon.